Welcome to Setting the Stage, Conversations about Performing Arts Health. My name is Elaine Whitmire, and I am a cellist and doctoral student at the University of North Texas with a related field in performing arts health. Today, I am delighted to welcome a wonderful violist, pedagogue, and lecturer, Dr. Katrin Meidell. Dr. Meidell is a newly tenured associate professor at the Schwab School of Music at Columbus State University in Georgia. She is a proponent of new music, a Karen Tuttle Coordination pedagogue, and founding member of Violet, a viola and clarinet duo. Dr. Meidell has degrees from Boston University, New England Conservatory, and the University of North Texas, where she was involved with the Texas Center for Performing Arts Health, and wrote her dissertation on epidemiological evaluation of pain among string instrumentalists. Dr. Meidell, welcome and congratulations on your tenure and promotion to Associate Professor of Viola.
Thank you so much.
I'm really excited to talk to you today. First, I'd like to hear what performing arts health means to you.
I think it means science facilitating ergonomic and thus free artistic expression.
Yes, wonderful. I really agree with that statement. And I found that it's really helped me as a musician, personally.
Good. That's awesome. Was it your cello teacher that helped you with that, or was it studying performing arts health?
Both my cello teacher and a great deal of studying the performing arts health specifically, especially musculoskeletal health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. What about you? When did your interest in performing arts health begin?
A long time ago. Between my undergrad and my master's degree that summer, I sustained an injury where I basically lost feeling in the left side of my body, which was really scary. And it kind of, most of that went away, but the left arm just kind of stayed really weak, which obviously was a big problem for playing viola. And it took a good year of rehabilitation and going to various doctors and all kinds of therapists. And I think also just an incredible viola teacher to be able to come away from that and, you know, continue on with my playing. So ever since then, and that was 2003, ever since then, I've always been really interested in what makes us tick and how can we stay healthy so that we can keep doing what we love.
Right, and I'm sure that inspired you to be able to share that experience with your own students, right?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, wonderful. We'd like to hear about your experience in the Harvard Neuroscience Lab, studying musicians' brains.
Oh, okay, sure. So I did my undergrad at Boston University, where I was a double major in psychology and in music. And I wanted to do a senior thesis. So I went to my favorite psychology professor and said, hey, how can I blend music and psychology? And he said, well, you know, I really don't know anything about that, but there's this guy over at Harvard who is doing just that. So why don't I put you in touch with him? So I went over to his lab, which is the Music and Mirror Imaging Lab. And this is Dr. Gottfried Schlaug. And he said, yeah, sure, we can put you on a project here or there. So I basically started out as a low-level lab assistant. And I really didn't know anything about the materials we were using or the research models or anything, but just kind of being there and absorbing everything was really, really, really interesting. And so at first I sort of started out as a guinea pig for the functional MRI machine because they needed somebody who understood musical lexicon to be testing out these experiments that they were running. So basically, I would lie in an MRI machine and they would hook me up with EMG electrodes, and I would be hearing something, and then you would need to think about whatever it was you were told. Like, so there would be a command basically, and then you would need to think about that, and then you push a button. And then while all of that is happening, they're taking pictures of your brain and how your brain is working. So by doing this kind of research, scientists can see what the brain is doing when you're thinking about specific things. So that was really cool, and I got lots of pictures of my brain, which was pretty fun. And then another big part of my job there was to help recruit musicians for the experiments. So once, we had everything worked out, then I was sent out to get musicians. And so my senior thesis ended up being a project assessing fine mental motor skills in pianists. I said that wrong. Fine mental motor imagery in pianists. So we found that both music and visual imagery showed greater activation in the left hemisphere than the right, and that neither the primary auditory nor motor cortex activated during music imagery. So in the end, I ended up working there for about 5 years and worked up to actually running experiments and analyzing data. So it was a really interesting time in my life, and I really enjoyed it.
That's fascinating, and what a great opportunity as well.
It was really cool. And that's actually why I ended up talking to Dr. Chesky, because once I left Boston, I came to Denton, to North Texas, and I was like, hey, I want to keep doing this research. And he's like, well, we don't really have a MRI machine, but why don't we, look into this and look into this? And so it kind of started a lot more sciencey and became more applied as I did my doctorate.
That's wonderful. And so when you came to UNT, was the Texas Center for Performing Arts Health part of the reason you came to UNT, or was it an added bonus?
It was an added bonus, and it wasn't even called that then. It was the Texas Center for Music and Medicine. And no, it was not one of the reasons that I chose UNT. I chose UNT because of Dr. Susan Dubois.
Of course.
But I'm really glad that I ended up there, because obviously Dr. Chesky is just such a vibrant person who really helped my career along in a different way than I ever thought it would go.
Wonderful. And what made you decide to do your dissertation in the performing arts health, all of this experience that you'd had?
Well, I must admit, Dr. Chesky was a little bit pushy. He definitely pushing me to work towards this dissertation, and I really didn't want to do it. But it all started with a group project. I can't remember the class I was taking, but it was like a small course, and there were 3 doctoral students in it. And I was working with a cellist, Johannes Kleinman, and another violist, Daniel Stevens. And with help from Dr. Chesky, we put together a research model, we developed a questionnaire and collected all this data. But then nobody wanted to do the data analysis. And the data just kind of sat there, I think, for another year or year and a half. And then I was starting to think about my own dissertations, and I wanted to do a lecture recital and, something a little bit easier, just kind of, play a piece, do some research, talk about it, be done. And the dissertation committee said, no, this piece is already too well known, you can't do this. And so they rejected my my initial dissertation project. And I was all like bummed about it. I was like, oh, Dr. Chesky, what am I gonna do? And he's like, well, you're sitting on this wealth of information, why don't you do this? And I was like, fine. So I think it added probably a year to my degree to get through all of that data, because we had so many data points. But in the end, I think it was a really valuable project. So he was right, as always.
Of course, yes, it's absolutely valuable. It's so interesting. So when you got a little bit further into that project, and what did you discover in the literature review?
So this project started because all of us knew that, musicians experience pain when they play. And it's like, well, why is that? And what can we learn from that? And this all started with a project that was done in I think it was the 80s, the ICSOM study, where over 2,000 professional musicians were surveyed. And in that survey, it was shown that 12% of professional musicians retire from their musical careers due to pain. And then a whole bunch of other studies also showed things like pianists and string players report higher levels of pain than other instrumentalists. Women report higher prevalence of pain than men. And at that point also, there was like 1 or one of two research models. It was either a large survey that could only suggest correlations between pain and playing an instrument, and then there were these small studies where you'd have like a handful of subjects providing data on the ways in which specific body sites react and or adapt to the demands of playing an instrument, but none of that can be extrapolated to the larger population. So we wanted to see if we could find something, put together a project that had a large number of people where it wasn't just a survey.
Mm-hmm. And how did you design that survey?
One of the things that was really important for us was that we distinguish each group of string players, because in the literature that we had studied up until that point, you would have either string players, like one big group, like you and I do the same thing, or we would have uppers and lowers. So like violin and viola, same thing, or cello bass, same thing, which clearly they're not. I mean, there's a lot of differences between those four instruments. So that was one of the very big important things that we did. And I think actually it's the first study that had this categorization of each instrument as its own thing. So that was one really important thing. And then we also wanted to look at all of the possible correlations, things like performance anxiety, demographics, behavioral indices, anthropometric measurements, and of course, correlating to specific instruments. So including the size and shape of variable instruments, because as you know, basses and violas aren't all a set size, and some have different size shoulders or slopes or whatever. So we wanted to also include measurements about that.
And talking about that a little bit further, I believe you found that the musicians likely had used their knowledge of their body to select their instruments rather than previous studies had suggested, where perhaps people didn't fit their instruments very well. And so that might lead to the pain.
Right, yeah. I don't remember that part of it, but we did find certain anthropometric measurements, so measurements of physical attributes that caused pain in certain instrumentalists that did not cause pain in other instrumentalists. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah.
That's very, very neat. And what were your other main takeaways from this dissertation and the findings that you discovered?
Well, one of the things that we were interested in was whether or not performance anxiety could possibly affect pain or vice versa. And so we did find that 73% of our subjects experienced performance anxiety as a negative experience. 18 said it was positive, which I thought was really interesting. And 9% said they just didn't experience performance anxiety at all. I wish I had been one of those 9%. So certain behavioral and anthropometric variables, including age, were correlated with a subject's experience of performance anxiety. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think I've lost the point of your question. Sorry, I spun off.
No, you're great. Main takeaways from.
Okay, main takeaways. Yeah. So pain and performance anxiety are experienced differently in violins, violas, cellists, and bassists. So obviously, I mean, that it just seems like such an obvious thing to say that the things that I have to do to play my instrument are going to be different than the things you have to do to play your instrument, and therefore we're going to experience different issues. But nobody had shown that before, so main takeaway there. For our group, it was interesting. We actually found that gender was not a significant variable in pain prevalence, which did not agree with previous findings. I don't know if anyone has, I don't know where that is now, about 10 years later. I don't know what's going on with that. But we found that certain anthropometric and behavioral variables were significantly correlated with pain and with performance anxiety. So that's pretty interesting also. Nobody had done that kind of research before either. And then I think a novel finding was that performance anxiety correlated significantly with hours of practice per week, which suggests probably or perhaps that the more a musician practices, the more invested they are in the outcome, which sounds kind of obvious, but to the best of my knowledge has never been shown before. And I think another novel finding was that certain physical variables of particular instruments were significantly correlated with performance anxiety. So suggesting that the size of a musician's instrument influences the way they think about performance. So for example, like if you have a viola with a really large upper bout and you're trying to, you have a big shift or something like that, and you're like, oh, here comes that big shift and I can't get around my instrument, you're probably gonna have a different reaction than somebody who has maybe a smaller bouted viola.
Right. I find that so interesting. And I mean, you say, well, some of it seems like common sense, but I think it's wonderful that you were able to confirm some of these concepts that maybe you and I have learned through our lessons and things, but now they're confirmed through a study. It's very, very fabulous. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about your free response questions that you included on your survey, where you grouped them into somatic and cognitive phrases. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you came to those groupings and classifications?
Yeah, so our survey, the survey portion, I guess the questionnaire that we included with each of our subjects was fairly open-ended in certain questions. We had questions like, how does performance anxiety affect your playing? And people could just write whatever they thought about. And so we ended up with a lot of these free-form responses, and it became necessary to try to group them into different categories. For a question like, how does pain affect your playing? A subject would write something like posture or power or enjoyment or intonation or musicality. And so I sat down with these responses and tried to group them into under like headings. So we had somatic, non-musical. So like posture, power, wrist, upper back, like where a person said, I'm now thinking about this body part. And then we had cognitive, non-musical, like lack of focus or enjoyment. Somatic musical, which was something like tone or intonation or vibrato, bow control, those kinds of things. And then cognitive musical, so musicality, repertoire, that kind of thing. And as far as I recall, Dr. Chesky was really helpful in this, because I was sitting with like, I don't know, 50 different words, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with these? But I think once he helped me realize that I could group these into different categories, it started to make a lot of sense.
And these are just so interesting to me to read through them, and how revealing they are for the thought processes, especially how many somatic musical concepts are going through someone's mind.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about the dissertation that was just important or stand out to you?
I don't know if I mentioned this, but I think probably the most important thing that we showed is that pain and performance anxiety affect one another. And I actually think towards the end of this project, I wanted to call it epidemiological evaluation of pain and performance anxiety in string instrumentalists, but I had already submitted the dissertation under the original name, so I couldn't get performance anxiety in there, which I think is a bummer, because it's actually, one of the really big things that we showed with this study, that they affect each other.
Well, it's very interesting, and I read through it, and I think it's really, really incredible. And some of the things that you've talked about in terms of, there were all of the previous studies had very limited groups or grouping violists or cellists together, which you and I both find ridiculous, but that's what these researchers did. So yours is really stand out because it really narrows in on the different instruments. And how things affect people differently. Wonderful. So I would like to talk a little bit about Karen Tuttle Coordination, and I think this relates so much, obviously, to performing arts health. So if you could just tell us a little bit about Karen Tuttle Coordination.
Sure. So without going too deep into the weeds here, Karen Tuttle was a violist and pedagogue, and she, through her studies with William Primrose and Pablo Casals and a couple of other people, she developed what is now called coordination, which is, it's a method, but it's not like the Suzuki method where everybody, you know, kind of does the same thing. But basically it's a series of concepts that emphasize using the body in the most natural way to play viola. So I actually have my handy dandy visual aid here. So one thing that you see very often with musicians who play a violin or viola is this kind of a head position. I don't know if Zoom caught it, but as soon as I did this, you could hear my voice change.
Yes.
And that's because, you know, you're twisting your neck and you're causing a whole bunch of tension in your neck. So one of the major tenets of this coordination is that you want to keep your head in the same position that you would do when you're having a conversation with someone. So finding a way to balance your instrument in your natural shape. So I use this with all of my students. One of the first things I ask a new student is, do you ever experience pain anywhere? And then I start looking at their setup. Is there something that's making them raise their shoulder, or are they twisting their neck, or are they doing, you know, something crazy with their shoulder or whatever? So, you know, you want to find a way to make the instrument fit you, and that way you're completely free and you're not causing excess tension. Yeah, so basically it's a focus on using only as much physical effort as necessary.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I mean, that ties in perfectly with your dissertation topic. And I think that's wonderful as a way to help your students with the pain that you researched. Excellent. And so performing arts health, how has your, beyond what we've already discussed, how has your experience with this topic and your research informed your playing?
You know, it's hard to say that if the research or the Karen Tuttle method or my own injury made X, Y, and Z happen, you know, like, because they're all just part of my path. So I don't really think, oh yes, that one day that I had this one class is where the light bulb went off. But I think all of it just together helped create who I am today. So, but definitely having this awareness of physicality and tension in strange places. I feel like because of my own injury and because of the work that I did at UNT, I am pretty able to see tension in other people and other players. And so I'm very quickly able to diagnose basically, okay, well, clearly there's an issue here. Let's see if we can figure out how we can get your instrument sitting in a better way. And one thing that's actually been kind of fun, in my previous job, I actually had students who would come to me and say, well, I like hurt all the time when I play clarinet. Can you help me figure that out? And I would like do this, you know, one-on-one session with a clarinetist. I know nothing about playing clarinet, but you know, I could see the tension where this kid is just doing way more than they need to. And I did that with a cellist, and I've done it with violinists, so I feel like I was able to just kind of develop my own understanding of the body to then be able to help other people, which is what I try to do.
Wonderful. And a combination of all of these things, the scientific research, but then also your experiences as a performer and Tuttle coordination, all of those things coming together to make you into a wonderful pedagogue.
Thanks.
And so how have you incorporated these experiences into your general career beyond just teaching and performing, but building your life as a contributor to the music field?
Sure. So yeah, I every couple of years or so I'll submit an abstract to present at a conference, and I've done hearing health for musicians, which is obviously really important, and I once did a vocal health presentation, and I'll do just like a musculoskeletal health, or so I kind of parse out the four main things, you know, mental health, musculoskeletal health, auditory health, and vocal health, just to try to help inform other educators and other, you know, people in the field. And then I do this with my own students too. Obviously, I'm very, very crazy about earplugs, and and I think that's all Dr. Chesky and all of the work that he has done on hearing health. So I got that from him, and you know, I encourage all of my students to wear earplugs if they need them, and yeah, so I've tried to incorporate some of the performing arts work that I've done to disseminate to a larger audience.
Mm-hmm. That's so important, because I feel like we're still getting the word out to a certain extent. Yeah. And what's the most recent thing you've been working on with relation to performing arts health?
Oh, you know, I really haven't been, so shame on me. But it's been pretty full on with just being a viola professor. So while I haven't been doing anything new in performing arts health, I still feel like I am a big proponent of it. So. Absolutely,
and you incorporate it into your teaching, so it's still absolutely valuable and important. Wonderful. Is there anything else you would like to add today?
Yeah, I guess just, you know, just to say that if a person isn't physically or emotionally, or, you know, if they aren't free, it's going to be really hard to make music. So if you're free, you can sing, and in the end, that's what being a musician is really about. It's singing through your instrument. So I think performing arts health has been really informative for both my playing and my teaching, and I don't think I'd be as effective a teacher if I didn't have these experiences that I do. So if Dr. Chesky watches this, thanks, Chris. And all of my amazing viola teachers, thank you. And yeah, pass it on, you know, like stay comfortable and stay true to your own body.
Wonderful. I think that's really vital words to this whole conversation, because why do we do it other than to allow ourselves to be free and performers? Well, thank you, Dr. Meidell, for speaking with me today about performing arts health, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it very much.